fair. We'll both probably wind up with the two best records in baseball, yet one of us is gonna be
stuck playing in the single elimination wild card game. Unfair? Tell it to the 54 Yankees.
Or the 1909 Cubs.
Hey everyone, this is Willow Tool welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. And of course, my voice is a little bit, a little bit worn from screaming and yelling over this weekend's games and all the rest of it. But I'd like to welcome you to this week's show. I had one in mind, but I'm going to save it, I think, for a future edition. I think you'll like it, and that is particularly about sports artists. And I know I have an affinity for art and obviously cartoons, but this week I'd like to devote some time, and the cartoon really brings it up, and that is teams that have won 100 games yet won't get to the postseason. Now, of course, the Dodgers and the Giants are in a different realm right now because both are competing not just for the Western Division title of the National League, but also they're both battling to have the best records in both leagues. And they may and it's kind of crazy, they may finish with a tie with the best record. So I was thinking about, I always immediately think about the 1954 Yankees as a team that didn't make the playoffs, yet they won 103 games. And as I've mentioned in past shows, they finished 8 games behind the American League pennant winner that year, the Cleveland Indians. And of course, the Indians had some great pitching that year with Bob Lemon, Bob Feller, Mike Garcia, and others on that squad. But I did some research, albeit it is quick, but I did find about 8 teams that won 100 games. But here's the thing. Not only did they win 100 games and not qualify for the playoffs, but they finished with a better record than any of the other divisional leaders, or in case way back when, before we had all divisional play, starting with 1969, they finished with the better record of even the American or National League pennant winner that year. And specifically, I'd like to talk about certain teams. And we go back, as the cartoon stated, all the way back to the 1909 Chicago Cubs. And they were a really good team. They were led by the famous double play combination of Tinkers to Evers to Chance. And of course, the trivia question with that team is, who was the third baseman? And it's Harry Steinfeld. Actually, those 4 players were good but not great players. And I believe it's the poem that really gets them over the hump, particularly Tinkers and Evers, and into the Hall of Fame. But that team was guided by a fellow by the name of Frank Chance, and they were led by 2 really good pitchers, Mordecai Three-Finger Brown and Orville Overall. And that 1900 team wins 104 games. They had 49 losses and 2 ties. And of course, baseball doesn't recognize ties except for compiling them into statistics. But that team finished, ready for this, behind the Pittsburgh Pirates, who won 110 games, 1 fewer than the Cleveland Indians of 1954. The incredible thing is that I chose both the 1909 Cubs and the 54 Yankees. Well, first of all, they are 2 national teams. And that by saying is that where, let's say, the Braves might be a regional team, or the Reds might be a regional team with Lower Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, it seems to me that the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Cubs seem to have a national following. So I picked those. But then when I was doing the research, I realized, wow, the Cubs had the best record, with the exception of the Dodgers, the best record of a team that didn't make the playoffs chose them. And of course, the 54 Yankees, because let's face it, hopefully there's a lot of people who do maybe turn into this show who are Yankee fans. So I'd like to give some information about those 54 Yankees as well. That was a really good team, and that was in the middle of Yankee dominance, especially for the 1950s. But that 1900 team, Three-Finger Brown was in fact a three-finger pitcher. And what I mean is this: he actually had, I believe it was an accident where his index finger was torn down really at the beginning of his finger. And for years, he basically had, I would consider it like a plug instead of a finger. But he used that beautifully for pitching and really being a successful pitcher. In fact, I was looking at his stats. Ready for this? Mordecai Brown was a big-time winner that year. He did lead the Cubs in WAR in 1909. Ready for this? He finished his career with 58.4 as a WAR. He was a Hall of Famer, two-time World Series winner, and an ERA titleist. He led the league with an ERA in 1906 of 1.04. Now, I know Gibson is seen as the modern-day leader for the National League with a 1.12 back in 1968. But ready for this? From 1906 to 1910, not only did Mordecai win 20 games, but in 4 of those years, he won 25 or more games. Totally different kind of a game. Mordecai and the Cubs played the dead ball era. I get it and all the rest of it. But not only did he lead the league in ERA, ready for this? He posted ERAs of 1.04, 1.39, 1.47, 1.31, and it was inflated to 1.86 before it became what we consider decent ERAs today: 2.8, 2.64, 2.91. He led the league in saves one year with 13, and that was a year where he also had 53 games he was involved in, with 27 games started. He was 21-11 with the 1911 Cubs. But that 1909 team, he won a National League leading 27 games. He was 27-9. Kind of like the year that Sandy Koufax had. I think it might have been 65. Might have been 64, 65, where he won 27 games and lost 9, had like an ERA of 1.82 or something like that. He was just phenomenal way back when. But Mordecai actually was able to put the ball right here and use the nub or plug of his finger to make it go in all different directions and all the rest of it. He used a disadvantage because, let's face it, most people have 5 digits that are in perfect shape. This one, though, and I believe he had an accident when he was a kid, and that is why he had the stub. But he was able to use it with perfection. And obviously, anybody who wound up, ready for this, not only does he have 5 20-win seasons, he also had a year where he posted 18, a year where he won 15, and then at the age of 38 in his next to last season, 17-8 with the Cubbies in 1915 with a 680 winning percentage and a 2.09 ERA. He wound up with 239 career victories against 130 losses. Basically, 240 and 130, almost doubling for a 648 winning percentage and a 2.06 ERA. One year, he actually pitched 342 innings, and that was the year he actually won 27 games. So Mordecai Brown was one of the big leaders on that team. Another one was a fellow by the name of, and I had to bring him up, Orville Overall. I mean, he has a name. It's great. Some of the great names all time of baseball, and I'm going to plan on doing a nickname show. I guess I have to make it politically correct in some respects, because there are some nicknames you cannot repeat today because it would just cause too many problems. But Orville Overall won 20 games for that Cub team. They also had Ed Rohrbach, who won 19, and Jack Feister with 17 more. Now, obviously, the 1909 Cubs and early baseball, and I'm going to predate this. I'm going to say pretty much what baseball historians like to remark as the dead ball era, and that goes up to about right when Babe Ruth really comes into his own as a home run hitter. But even during the 20s, outside of Ruth and maybe Gehrig and all the rest of it, there still was maybe that transition to the game becoming more relying on the home run ball than, let's say, the small ball. And then, of course, 1930, you see the decade of where just the offense just goes through the roof in both leagues. And it's never been as high for those 10 years, I do believe, as it was in the 1930s. It's had its peaks, but nowhere near for a whole 10 years as the decade of the 30s. But Orville, overall, another great pitcher, played 2 World Series, 22.4. And what I say is a great pitcher. Well, ready for this? He kind of had a truncated career. He only pitched 7 years, but in those 7 years, he was 108 and 71, a 600 winning percentage, actually 603. And 1909 was not his best year, but it was one of his 2 seasons where he won 20 games. He was 23 and 7 in 1907, followed by a 15 and 11 ledger. And then in 1909, he was 20 and 11 with a 1.42 ERA. He did lead the league that year in strikeouts, and there were 2 years, the 2 years where he won his most games, 20 games, and 23, where he led the league in shutouts with 8 and 9 respectively. That was 1907 and 1909. Again, I was doing a quick research on this, and I do apologize. In future shows, I'd like to go back and do almost like a cleanup and say, hey, listen, here's why Orville overall kind of left the game and all the rest of it. He actually left in 1910, and I'm sure it's because of injuries, and came back in 1913. So he basically lost 2 seasons. And he came back to the Cubs 4-5 with a 444 winning percentage and a 3.84 ERA, certainly almost doubling his ERA for his career. But I really believe this. I think injuries probably were a real problem for his career. And that is why, as I stated, he had such a short, truncated baseball career, but still 108 and 71. And as Baseball Reference, and I go to this, or Baseball Almanac, but they have a 162 game average for the players that they use. He would have been 18 and 12. Now, the only reason I really don't, I have some problems with this because there are some years where maybe the stats shouldn't be considered. Maybe he takes him 3-4 years and it's like he goes 1 and 2, or I'm just talking about any pitcher, 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4, and then he has the guts of his prime. I would love to see also not just Baseball Reference, and they've done a marvelous job, so who am I going to complain? But I would love to see, okay, what their prime looked like as opposed to their overall 162 game ledger. But that was Orville overall. And like I say, I love his name because it sounds like a character from the old show, one of my favorite of all time, Green Acres. Can't you just see him as one of Oliver Wendell Douglas's neighbors? And he's probably in charge of growing sweet potatoes or corn or barley or rice, and he's probably right next to Fred Ziffel up there. This team, though, is led by their manager. He was a player manager, Frank Chance. Frank Chance was just a real splendid person. He died at an early age, and I was reading a little bit about it. Seemed like he had a long-term illness. I'm guessing either something like TB or maybe cancer, but he was quite a successful manager. he managed 1,620 games. I just want to give you this. He managed the Cubs from 1905 to 1912, then goes to the Yankees. He is under 500 with the Yankees, but while he was with the Cubs, ready for this, he does have the most wins of any National League manager in a season with 116. Remember, that Cub team was tied by the Mariners, I think in 2001 or 2002. But the Cubs of 1906, they win the NL pennant, but don't win the World Series. They go 116-36, 80 games over 500, and they have a 763 winning percentage that year. The 1907 follow it with 107 wins. Imagine winning 107 games and having a bad season. And that's what the Cubs did. But they managed to come back and win the World Series. In fact, they win the 1907 and 1908. And they even fall again in 1908, winning just 99 games. So that team wouldn't qualify for today's story or today's theme of teams that have won 100 and didn't qualify for the playoffs. But that team did win the World Championship. And then he follows it with back-to-back 104-win seasons in 1909 and 1910. He was actually incredible. In fact, ready for this, Frank Chance takes over the 1905 Cubs about 70 games into the season, and he manages to have them finish in third place. It's a shame that Cub management did decide to move him sooner, because that team under Frank Chance played at a 625 clip. They won 55 out of their last 88 games. Chance replaced Frank Seeley, who guided the team to a 37-28 mark. But you could see, just judging by the Cubs' future, that maybe the Cubs the management recognized that Seeley wasn't going to take them to the promised land. That's number one. And maybe Seeley wasn't getting the most out of the talent on the ball club. I think you could argue that Frank Chance made the most out of his chance, no pun intended, and taking the Cubs, winning 4 times over 100 games, and in all of his seasons with the Cubs, winning over 90 games. And even if you obviously 625 baseball, you are talking about a team that would win anywhere between 91 and 99 games. They would have won probably about 95 games that year had he been the full-time manager back starting in April 1905. But that's the Cubs. And they didn't make the World Series that year. They were beaten by the Honus Wagner-led Pirates of 1909. And the Cubbies lose to a team that the Pirates, they won 110 games, finished with a 724 winning percentage, and are led by a guy by the name of Honus Wagner, who is recognized by most baseball historians as one of the great, arguably probably a top 10 player of all time, but he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And Wagner was a terrific ball player. In fact, that year, ready for this, and anybody who followed or watched the show last week knew I was kind of talking about the 1 homer, 3 RBI ratio that Earl Weaver had always purported to want, that he wanted pitching, defense, and the 3-run homer. And I kind of did a whole show showing how it really isn't that true to a certain extent. Well, here's Wagner. Ready for this? He only hit 5 home runs. Now, this is the dead ball era, but he drove in 100 runs. The only player on the team to drive in 100 runs for that 110-win Pirate team. And he had an amazing 39 doubles and 10 triples to guide the Pirates to the World Series. And they do beat the Tigers in 7 games that year with their manager, Fred Clark, another great all-time manager, leading the way. So can you imagine? You have 2 teams in the same league winning not just over 100 games, but really deep into it, 104 and 110 respectively. To win 110 games, now I didn't do the stats on this, but I got to be honest with you, I know this. The 1975 Reds won 108 games. And the Dodgers that year won 88, and they finished 20 games behind the Reds. So imagine winning 110 and only escaping and winning the pennant in the National League by really 6 games. You would think in any year, 110, you're going to do like the Reds did and win by double digits and maybe even 20, 25 games. That was incredible. And it just goes to show you how competitive those two teams were. In fact, just to give you an idea, here's Fred Clark with the 110 wins. His career with the Pirates started in 1900. He wins 100 games twice. He wins 90 games 6 times. He's a World Series champion once and wins the NL pennant an additional 3 times. I mean, you're talking about great managers. Yes, they do have great players, Honus Wagner, like I said. And for the Cubbies, I got to be honest with you. The Cubbies with, and here's what I'm going to say. That Cubby team, Mordecai Brown, as a kid, I always loved his name too when I was finally introduced. He had a 58.4 WAR. All right. He is in the Hall of Fame. But that Cub team, ready for this? Frank Chance is a Hall of Famer, had a 46 WAR as a player. He is definitely in as a manager more. Johnny Evers, Hall of Famer, 47.7 WAR. Tinker, Joe Tinker is in the Hall of Fame, 53.2 WAR. And the last one, Evers, Tinker's the Evers, the Chance. All 3 are under what Mordecai Brown was for his career. So you can say, the Cubs had 4 players for the Hall of Fame, all over 50, which isn't bad, I guess. But the real star on that team was not the double play combo of Tinkers to Evers to Chance, but it was really Mordecai Brown. He was kind of like the Tom Seaver of that team in a way, okay? Next team I'd like to, and I want to save the Yankees, I guess, for last, but I want to talk about the 42 Dodgers. Now, the 42 Dodgers, I think this is interesting because the 41 Dodgers win the pennant. Now, the 42 Dodgers don't get there, but ready for this, the 42 Dodgers will start, or that Brooklyn team of 1941 will start a Dodger run in the World Series. Ready for this? And I know it offhand, but I just want to do it. They get to the World Series and lose to the Yankees in 5 games. They don't make it in 42 or 43 or 44 or 46. You can attribute the 44 and 45 to the war years. But 1947, with Jackie Robinson in the lineup, they lose the World Series. They don't get near the World Series in 48 with the Spawn Insane 2 days of rain getting into the World Series. And that team losing to the Cleveland Indians. They do make it in 49, losing 50, losing 51, and another great run with their arch rival, the Giants, losing, of course, on the Bobby Thompson home run, which will be celebrated next week when I have the next show, God willing. And then 52, they lose the World Series. 53, they lose the World Series. 54, which is the Yankees getting beat by the Indians. Well, the Dodgers get beat by the Giants. And then in 55, Nirvana. They finally get to the promised land. 56, of course, they lose to the Yankees in 7 after beating the Yankees in 7 with Johnny Padres on the mound in Game 7. So really, when you think about it, that 41 team was really the beginning. It was the catalyst for all those great Dodger teams of the 40s. But this 42 team, why I'm looking at them, I was pretty much ready for this. They have Pee Wee Reese, Hall of Famer, 6.2 WAR, was the leader. But I really want to talk about a guy by the name of Pete Reeser. My mother-in-law, Josephine, just loved him. And I can tell you this. They had Dov Camilli on that team, who I mentioned last week, 26 homers, 109 RBIs. He did lead the league in home runs, I believe, in 1941. I don't know what I was thinking of, with 34 and 120. And he was one of those guys, ready, that was 1 homer, 3 RBIs. But the guy I really wanted to talk about, who probably could have been a Hall of Famer had he not been hurt, was Pete Reiser, in another one who had an injury-riddled career. He played 10 years. He also lost 3 to the military. But he could have played. Now, Baseball Reference, and I think this is where it is a nice help for me and for any baseball fans, just to see this player in context, because he misses so many games with really career-ending injuries, concussions. He used to run into walls all the time. And I believe one year he ran right into a concrete wall and not just got a concussion. He suffered a fractured skull and managed to come back from the games. To wit, here it is. Even in his full-time seasons, when he made the All-Star games in 1941, get this, Reiser leads the league in runs scored, 117. He has 184 hits. He leads the league with doubles, 39, and triples with 17, to go with 14 homers, 76 RBIs, and leads the league in batting average with a 343 batting average, drew 46 walks. He had a 558 slugging average to lead the league, and a 964 OPS. Now that is basically batting average plus on base slugging percentage, and you put them together and you get your OPS. And it might even be this. I'm even thinking it is. Pardon me. It is your on base percentage plus your slugging percentage. I think this is just an aside. That's too many numbers. I think most baseball fans can realize you have a batting average, you have an on-base percentage. On-base percentage indicates that you can get a ton of walks. And then your slugging percentage really indicates that you're hitting for power. So your batting average is not just singles hitters like a Matty Alou or a Felix Millan, but that your hits are really power, really beef up the power and all the rest of it, that your doubles and triples could realize RBIs. So sometimes I just think they're redundant in some of the stats at today's metrics. But that was his 41 season. You could actually argue, and he does finish second in the MVP to Dov Camilli. Probably should have been the MVP. In fact, I'm just going to go to this with this 42 team. Ready for this? The 42 team, DiMaggio wins in the American League. He beats out Ted Williams, and Williams had the higher WAR, 10.4 to 9.4. But the Yankees win the World Series, or get to the World Series. Pete Reiser had a higher WAR than Dov Camilli. He had an 8 to a 6.9. This is not to denigrate either great player. What I'm saying is, though, that Reiser was terrific. He actually led the league in addition with 299 total bases in 41. He follows that, and he only played 137 games. And I guarantee you, of the 154, he missed 17 games. I guarantee you that some of them were a result of injury. Why? Because in 42, he plays 125. I know he got hurt that year. He leads the league in stolen bases. He really has a come down, but he scored 89 runs, had 149 hits, 33 doubles, 5 triples, 10 homers, 64 RBIs, still hit 310, had a 463 slugging percentage. His walks went up by 2. He had an on-base percentage of 375. And like I said, he stole 20 bases, was only caught stealing once. He goes into the Army, Reiser. And I'm telling you right now, the more and more I think about Reiser, the more and more many of today's fans will probably remember Bobby Valentine, manager of the Mets. But you'll also remember that he was an unbelievable 3-star athlete out of Connecticut. back in 73 or 74, he's playing for the Angels and ran into the wall and did damage to his leg. I think he may have broken or dislocated his ankle. Lost all his speed, I believe, as a result. But he was hitting, I think, at the time, 302 for the Angels. I mean, he came up with the Dodgers. He was on his way to being a very good player. I'm not going to say he was going to be an all-star or a Hall of Famer. Who knows? Maybe he didn't. But he did a lot of good things that you could see him sparking offenses. Valentine gets hurt, never the same. And as a kid, when I found out about Reeser, I almost made the same connection between Reeser and Valentine. Well, Reeser, as I said, and my mother-in-law attested, would always run into walls. And this is before they were padded. And you got to remember that Wrigley Field, I don't think it always had the ivy. But still, you're running into the brick. And ivy is not really going to pad all that much if you're going full speed. You're running into a brick wall. The ivy maybe cushions it a little, but not much. But in 46, when the Dodgers again got beat by the Cardinals, he led the league with stolen bases, 34. Had a high percentage, 34, 11 caught. He had 21 doubles, 5 triples, 11 homers, 73 RBIs. He hit 277 with a 361 on base percentage and a 428 slugging. Now, he is 3 years removed from the game, coming back, but he only played 122 games. Now, not doing the research, I'm just guessing off the cuff. Maybe he comes back late from the Army. It takes him a few games or a month or so to get reacquainted with the game, acclimated, just getting into baseball shape. But I can tell you this. This is not coincidence. That would be his last year where he played over 120 games in the season. In 47, when the Brooklyn Dodgers finally get to the pennant again, after 41, of course, and he plays in his second World Series. He played 110 games. Ready for this? 23 doubles, 2 homers, 5 home runs, 46 RBIs. He leads the league in caught stealing. He hits 309. And then it is really downhill from there for Reeser. Never again plays more than 90 games, let alone 100, let alone 120. In 48, he only played 64 games, hit 236. In 49, plays 84 games, hits 271. In 1950, he's with Boston in 49 and 50. They finally traded him away. He hits 205. Then he gets traded to the Pirates, and basically his career is over. He hit 271 in 74 games, and then he's with Cleveland in 1952, where he played in 34 games, and basically his career is over. I think with the concussion and fractured skull, he did have trouble with his vision. I can only guess all of the problems that he had. But I will tell you this. He's born, I'm just trying to think if I have more bio on him. I'm pretty sure, yeah. He died in 1981 at the age of 62. I don't think he was in the best of health. Does really, when you think about it, he does die young. But Reeser was on that 42 team and really was one of the catalysts on that ball club. And he has a 24.6 WAR. Just think of it this way. In 1941, when he finishes in second place to fellow teammate Dolph Camilli, he has an 8 WAR. In 1942, when he finished 6th in the MVP, ready for this? His WAR was 5.5. It was 5th, excuse me. He probably should have finished 5th. Mickey Owen, a teammate with the Dodgers, he finished actually in 4th place, as he had a no home runs, 44 RBIs, hit 259, but probably was seen as a defensive stalwart, and that is why he finished 4th. Mort Cooper was the 42 winner. He won 22 games, led the league. He had a 1.78 ERA for that team. Ready for this? The 42 Cardinals, as I'm just scrolling this through, they win the World Series, best the Cubs, best the Dodgers. Ready? They have Mort Cooper, who led in WAR 8-3. Eno Slaughter was on that team, a future Hall of Famer, 6'9", WAR. And Stan Musial had only a 5.3. All Musial did was belt 32 doubles, 10 triples, 10 homers, 72 RBIs, and hit .315 at the age of 21. So he's just coming into his own. That would probably be the last year, I'm just looking, until he retired. Ready for this? That was probably one of the worst, quote-unquote, seasons that Stan Musial ever had, because, ready for this, the next season, 43, Musial leads the league in hits, 220, doubles with 48, triples with 20, home runs with 13, 81 RBIs, leads the league with a .357 batting average, .425 on-base percentage. He would lead the league 5-6 times over the next 8 years in batting average. He would drive in 100 runs 9 times, 10 times over the next 12 seasons or 13 seasons. I think you know where I'm going with this. He was not called the man out of derision. He was the man. And that year of 1942, the Dodgers best the Brooklyn Dodgers. Ready for this? They beat him by 2 games. The Dodgers win 104 and don't get to the promised land of the World Series. The St. Louis Cardinals would win 106, battle the Yankees, and beat the Yankees in 5 games. Here's the thing. The Yankees won 103. So you have 106, 104, and 103. Tell me, how do you feel like the Dodgers? Not only do the Dodgers finish with the second best record, but the team with the third best record happens to be the team that they are constantly snake bit playing in the World Series. And that is arch rival outside the Giants, but crosstown rival or cross-borough rival, the New York Yankees, who win 103 and win the 1942 pennant. Now, speaking of the Yankees, they, in 1954, well, let's be honest. I know there's a lot. The cartoon stated, how would you feel like if you were the 54 Yankees? Well, not being a Yankee fan and always hating them because all they did was win. This had to be one of my most satisfying stick it to you Yankees kind of stories I could ever have. However, let's face it, the 54 Yankees, yeah, they do finish second to the Indians, who are led by Al Lopez. And Al Lopez guides the only 2 teams in the 50s in the American League that beat the Yankees for the American League pennant, because in 59 he goes to the White Sox. So how do I feel about the Yankees not winning? Not too bad. It was nice change of pace. But to be serious, the Yankees won 103 games. How many times do you win 103 games and lose the pennant by 8 full games? This is the only season. And again, ready for this, 1909, 1915 Tigers with 100 wins. I'm just going to go through the list. The 1942 Dodgers with 104. The 1954 Yankees with 103 wins. The 61 Tigers, the 62 Dodgers, the 80 Baltimore Orioles, and the 93 Giants all win 100 games, all fail to make the postseason. And for the Giants, it's even worse because you had 4 division winners make it in 93, and still they don't get there. All of them finish with a better record than all the other teams in the postseason, with the exception of the team that they finished second behind in their own division or their own league. It's incredible. Well, that 54 Yankee team, they were terrible. Yogi Berra only had 22 homers, 125 RBIs, and he hit 307. Okay, ready for this? Probably the reason they only won 103 games is because Mickey Mantle had a bad year. And I am laughing. He played 146 games, so he kind of stayed injury-free that year. He had 17 doubles, 12 triples at the age of 22. He had 27 homers, 102 RBIs, and he hit 300, and he drew 102 walks. He had a 408 on-base percentage to lead the Yankees, and his OPS was 933. He had a terrible season. He's only 22. Well, the Yankees would make up for it they win the pennant in 50, 51, 52, 53. 53. They don't win it in 54. They get back in 55, 56, 57, 58, and they don't make it in 59. Do I feel really sorry for them? Not really. But still, you are looking at a team that was paced by, really, ready for this, they won actually 103 games, and Whitey Ford was only 16-8. Their big winner that year was a guy by the name of Bob Grimm, who was 20-6, who won a third of his career victories in 1954. He was 20-6 with a .769 winning percentage and a .326 ERA. This team had two other pitchers who won double digits in wins, with 12 by Eddie Lopat and Tom Morgan with 11. They win 103 and still can't beat the Indians, who win 108. This is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports History, bringing you today teams that won 100 games and failed to make postseason. See you next week with another edition. Thank you.